Welcome to Clothing Coulture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitger. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward.
And discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Coulture is brought to you by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience.
Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Coulture. Once again, we are in the delightful Penthouse 45 in Midtown Manhattan. Isn't this view spectacular, Bret?
It is, and the rain's passed by, and weather's looking to be on the rise the next few days.
And we have a fabulous guest with us today to talk about predicting the future of style. Our guest has been noted as a trend oracle with a ubiquitous understanding of sociology, history, and culture in fashion trends. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Emily.
Yes, and I should probably pronounce your full name, Sharon Graubard. Did I say that right?
Close enough.
I was very nervous about pronouncing your name. So you are the founder and creative director of MintModa, which is a trend forecasting consultancy and website. How did you get your start in the fashion industry? Let's start at the beginning.
Well, the beginning, I studied art. I never studied fashion. And in those years, it was kind of uncool to be into fashion.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny how the 70s, if I'm dating myself, are such an influence on fashion. But at the time, it wasn't cool. It was all very effortless, and you didn't act like you cared, even though you did. But I loved fashion. I loved old movies. So without knowing it, I was already a fashion historian, because
Slowly
of
sucking you in, right?
Yes.
Hard to get out once you're
And Vogue, I used to look at it at my friend. My mother didn't get it, but a friend's mother got it, so I would read it voraciously. I graduated from art school. I came to Manhattan. I grew up close by, and I always got jobs in the fashion industry. My first job was as a textile colorist because I could paint and I could mix colors. So I always tell young people, take a painting class. That's when you know, that red has a little bit of blue, or that's a yellow cast red or a yellow cast green. So I was a textile colorist. And then I started illustrating fashion. And the thing about illustration is you notice the tiniest thing. The waistline is slightly dropped. The shoulders are slightly wider this season, whatever it is. So it developed my eye. I always knew what was going to be happening next. That was something. I used to drive my mother crazy because I'd be like, I have to have round-toed shoes when all the shoes were pointy or something. I always had this thing of what was next. So between that and my art background and getting jobs as an illustrator, the people who used illustrators were fashion forecasting publications. So that's kind of my journey.
Oh my gosh, how fascinating. And then you were also kind of like you were an early on WGSN, right? As you kind of made your way into trend fast forecasting.
Well, I worked for a company called the Toby Report, which is now part of Doniger Group. And the Toby was considered the Bible of the fashion industry. And that was even our byline. I don't know if they still use it. And I illustrated for Toby. And at Toby, we would get the runway pictures. And at that, now runway is everywhere. You go on Vogue.com or anywhere and you see all the runway. At that time, the runway photos were a precious commodity. And we used to print a book of black and white. We didn't do color printing. Black and white pictures of the runway.
That's black, right?
Yeah, we don't.
That's all we saw. We were
it's
like,
fashion's
that's the
color.
fashion. It's black. Yeah.
That's right. And this book of runway photos was like the hottest book. Everyone was waiting for we were a weekly publication. Anyway, I said I could make a forecasting book using runway photos and tell stories with the photos. And my boss, Mrs. Dean, was like, "Are you sure?" And she let me do it with two of my coworkers. We developed this forecasting book. And, I always just saw stories. I would see like street urchins or
And that's the artist in you.
beatniks.
Yeah.
And
I love that you bring that perspective to forecasting. It's not just about identifying, what's happening on the waistline or the shoulders or the toe tips, but it's
The
looking at
recipients, the culture that's surrounding fashion, and that's what blew my. There's so many things that blew my mind when you walked me through MintModa. I mean, I've been in the industry for a while. They say tens of years to be polite, right?
At least it's not hundreds of years.
No, it's close.
feels like.
It's close to hundreds of years. Pick the day. But, I've interfaced with a ton of forecasting services. And I think when I walk through, one, I was the lucky recipient of a personal Sharon Graubard tour, which was nice. But I was amazed at the ability to distill all the noise. There's a lot of points of view, right? We live in a world that's super connected now. You mentioned, I would assume that fashion weeks and runways were even more condensed at one point. And today there's a million points of view coming from all over the place with our connectivity. And to be able to distill that information into a viable trend service that sits down and says, hey, here's what I think is the consumer is listening to and the consumer's responding to, because at the same time that you're seeing this compression of the world, right, and the ability to see everything happening in real time everywhere, we've also moved to a consumer-driven economy. That has got to be an interesting wrinkle about a fashion forecasting service, because it used to be designers would tell people what to wear.
That's right.
And today the most successful designers are those that are the medium and the channel for the consumer.
That's right. Well, it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned Mrs. Dean at the Toby Report. She was one of my early mentors, and I remember her saying that Mr. Neiman and I can't think of everybody of the olden days, but Nordstrom and Macy's and everybody would sit down, Saks and Bergdorf's, and decide what the length would be. And that was a big
All together
thing.
they would sit down?
Yes, they would
Okay, that's
sit
interesting.
down and make a decision about what's the length. And of course, it's not that way now.
Yeah,
Any
right.
length is good. It's what
They all
looks
sit down and don't decide what the
don't
length is.
decide.
Yeah, right.
So it's very different. And that's where the storytelling really becomes very important, because it's a narrative. You're telling a story when you get dressed. You're not saying, I'm wearing a skirt at this season's length.
Right.
You're saying, this is me, and these are my values, and these are my people. And you're somehow conveying that with the cut of your jeans and the fabric of your jacket.
You're part of a tribe.
And I think, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
MintModa is actually looking at the consumer demographic and the groups. You've
we do
labeled
tribes.
them. You've done these tribes kind of view, and that's the amazing part. It seems so visionary that as we move to this consumer-driven economy, you have looked outward to identify the tribes who are influencing fashion as we know it today.
Yes, it's a back and forth though, because the designers are so talented and there is so much information in every photo from the, people say when I first was working with the runways, Abercrombie and Fitch or a company like Casual company would say, well, we don't do ball gowns. And I would say, this is real. These are jeans, these are trousers, these are everyday dresses. These are visionary designers. When people say, oh, the runway's not relevant, it is relevant because they are channels.
Absolutely right.
They are channels for the consumer as well, the good ones.
The good ones, for sure. I think there are two separate groups, and I think that's what makes our business so fascinating. The ones that their business has grown commercially are these amazing channels with a wonderful aesthetic to channel the consumer. And then you have this offshoot of just pure artists. I'm expressing my view of the world and my view of life. And if you like it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. And I think that helps stem and spur the evolution of makes us think, right?
Yes.
You know, we had finished a podcast with another guest and we talked about, this whole trend in fluid fashion and non-binary. And, that's an exploration. That's a discovery of that. And there's these brave, talented designers that are walking down that space and trying to think through all that is that and the challenge within that anatomically and design and embracing and being, sensitive to the culture and understanding all those different things. And I think that's the nice combination of what exists today in our fashion world, right?
Yes. Well, I think even the most avant-garde designers, like I always say all roads lead to Rei, meaning Rei Kawakubo. And it's funny, I Googled that expression one day and I saw, somebody said it. And I looked it up and it was me. Because the quote came up.
You are an oracle. You actually found yourself way back then saying it today.
I look at Rei Kawakubo, black on different colors of black. That was a no-no.
Yeah.
Raw edges we're still exploring in fashion. The same with Martin Margiela. The most avant-garde designers are ones that I always include in my forecast because the seeds of what people will want are in there. So it's not wild and crazy stuff. It's an early spark.
A premonition, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. And the ideas, like I always say, we're not putting it out there because Miuccia Prada did it. We're trying to get at what Prada was thinking about. Yeah. So that's how we do the surround.
It's really getting inside the intention behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah. You really, were a trailblazer looking at runway to inform trends. What is your process now?
Well, it has changed a bit, although I still look at the runway and I'm still blown away at the ideas. Any sweater, you might do a close-up on a knit from Joseph Altazora or something. And there's so many ideas in there, the way it's finished, the stitchery, the way it hangs on the body. So I still look at runway, but I look at people a lot. Thank goodness I live in the East Village on the corner of Avenue A and 3rd. And to me,
if you want to send flowers,
I could just run across the street to buy a bottle of water and I see something that inspires me. I love real people, watching people. Of course, now we have Instagram, so it's like the whole world is there in the little 2-inch square on your phone. Right. People inspire me. History, costumes in movies in general, film is a tremendous inspiration, both past and present. You can, and that's why it drives me crazy when people say fashion moves so fast now. It moves at exactly the same rate that it has always moved.
I'm just moving much slower. That's why it seems fast.
It's you look at a movie from 1934 and the clothes look different than a movie from 1939 or 1942. I mean, fashion moves. It moves. So that's a really fascinating thing. I watch what's happening. I watch what the thrift shops have, what the vintage show, what's drawing people's attention at the last Metropolitan Vintage Show. That's a clue. All of these things are clues. And then it's almost like I see the clues all around me and then I find them on the runway. So it's almost the opposite.
Oh, how interesting.
I had a mentor one time that said fashion runs in 7-year cycles. I don't know if that's exactly true, but do you see cycles in fashion traditionally?
Wow, 7-year. Yeah, I mean, I have a theory that, well, as far as vintage decades, people are drawn to the decades of the time when their parents were young. So
My
whatever.
kids were exactly opposite what I wore. It was like, this statement of, I don't want to be my dad,
But there's that moment where, like, you see those old pictures of mom and dad when they first met, and they look so cool.
Yeah.
So it keeps kind of moving, like 80s, 90s. But I don't know. That's an interesting question about the cycle.
I've seen some. It never comes back the same.
Never the same.
There's always an evolution or a change to it. But like you mentioned, the seeds, that's a really
it is a
great
good description.
descriptive word. The seeds of the DNA of some of the things that have occurred in the past are finding its way into fashion, and it's, you mentioned the whole vintage show. You look and you go, they're looking to the past again to inform the present.
Inspire,
Or
right?
inspire the present.
Yeah. Do you, I get the sense that history has always kind of played a key role in your perspective. Do you think that in trend forecasting, it's important to be a historian in a sense?
Definitely. You have to know where we came from. One thing that really is so important is terminology, and it's not taught in school. It doesn't seem to be taught in fashion schools. I hope I'm not offending any educators who might be listening. I have talked to people about what a particular shirt looks like, and especially when I used to illustrate. And the person on the other end of the phone or in the showroom would be like, oh, it's just a regular. I'd say, what kind of collar? Oh, just a regular collar. There's no regular collar. Is it a point collar, a spread collar, a Peter Pan collar, a platter collar? What collar is it? And for fabric, too, they don't know the terms. Is it dry hand? Is it fluid? Is it crisp? So terminology is part of the communication. Anything you could do to communicate in fashion, history is part of it. Vocabulary is part of it. You have to know what it is in order to describe it, and then in order to play with it, to make it different than it was before.
Agreed.
Yeah.
You're kind of a curator, aren't you? A curator of visual experiences, of history, of storytelling, of what you see on the streets and words and descriptions. It really feels like you're a curator to me.
Yeah, it's funny that word is now such a part of everyday vocabulary, but it is. It's curating. It's almost like making a collage. Again, I come from that art background, so like I'm very into the words. We name items on MintModa. We call it something, and we're we just finished our denim report. And I even hate the name, our denim forecast, really. And last season, we called all the brown denims earth stained or earth wash. And this season, we called it coffee stained. But we'll never just say brown denim.
Right.
We find a thread that relates to what's happening now, what people are talking about, something that you can almost smell.
Visualization,
Yeah.
right? Something that sticks with you when you're reading all these different elements. I found that exactly to be accurate when you were walking me through. It's just like, it's a way that when people are in a hurried world, and not everyone in our industry are designers, right? There's everyday merchants, people that are going out trying to make decisions. They have different levels of skill, different levels of length of time in the industry, and looking at MintModa, there was this wonderful calmness I had to be able to walk through and go,
Yeah, it makes sense.
see. It makes
It's organized.
sense. It's you didn't, in our industry, you see it at trade shows. They're like flea markets. You can really find anything. If you want to support something, you can find it, right? We're diverse.
Yeah.
As a species, we're quite diverse. But I think, the ability to sit down in a very aesthetically pleasing and focused way, you present it to somebody that can sit down and say, okay, I kind of need some help here. Help me walk through where we're going in this crazy world, and as it relates to clothing and fashion. And I think it's just such a wonderful thing that you've done.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that was my original byline for MintModa, was making sense of the madness or making sense of the chaos or something like that. But we, with my partner, Maria Valentino, my business partner, we came up with the line, forecasts that move you, because we also felt that the emotional content of, and that goes back to the storytelling, and it goes back to clothes and consumers. Nobody needs a new top, but you fall in love with that top. Mm-hmm. You fall in love with the vision of yourself wearing that top.
Absolutely.
So it's very emotional.
It is. That's exactly how I look at when making purchase of a new garment. It's what is my experience going to be in wearing this item?
It's like a family member.
It is.
You have an extremely large family, by the way.
I bet.
Every day I walk in there, we are the world, because she has got a lot of clothes.
Well, she's
I love it. That's
also
why I'm in the
rocks
industry.
it. Yeah.
Well, somebody who might be interested in getting into the industry, understanding forecasting, maybe feels that they too are able to, have an uncanny approach to seeing what's going to happen in the future. Somebody might want to come join you at MintModa someday. What kind of advice would you have for them?
Be a psychic.
Get a crystal ball.
Yeah.
Well, it's watching and looking. And I do tell students, look at everything. You go to an art opening, go to a party, look at what people are wearing. Watch old movies, fashion history. It's so important for understanding. And also costume dramas. I love to see, and nowadays, costume just blows my mind. And then I say vocabulary, be able to express. The thing with fashion forecasting is it's a communication. So be an artist, be a graphic designer, be a writer. So important. You need to communicate your ideas to your clients. Color, take a color class, get your paints out, like Bret was saying, and I too have my paints out. Mix
Feels good, doesn't
colors,
it?
Yeah, messy,
nice.
but good.
Yeah.
That's part of the
That's
fun
part of the good. Yeah.
All of those things for forecasting you, and be aware of the culture, know what's going on. It's not about you. And it's a funny dichotomy with forecasting, because you have to make it personal and apply your taste, develop your taste and apply your taste. So it's very personal, but you also have to make it very universal. I always sort of balk when people say, "Oh, no one can wear that," or "I can't wear that. That won't look good on me." It's not about you.
A size small, I can't wear.
Yeah, but that's another thing that's happening right now. Fashion is for everyone. I've always felt so passionate about that. And now we're seeing curvy and husky and short and older. And fashion is for everyone. It's a joy. And it's been a mistake, I think, for the industry to make people feel like they're excluded. And now this new inclusive approach is very different than the past. And it's so important.
And refreshing. Yeah.
And invite everybody in. Like we were saying earlier, fashion can save the world.
I love that.
I really believe it.
I think that's all really, really excellent advice. It really seems that it's having kind of a voracious appetite for knowledge and experience.
Yes, and then bringing that into what does that do to a sweater? What does that do to a pair of pants? It doesn't just exist from nowhere. It's for a reason.
You write haikus for your website. Are you the writer of those?
Yes.
I think that is such a beautiful approach. It's taking all that you're seeing in these stories that you're telling and condensing it to just a few simple words. And in those haikus, you immediately get the essence of the story you're about to see.
Well, they are real haikus, by the way, 575. I sometimes just amazed. I read about a new fragrance called haiku, I think, and they had haikus to go with every fragrance, and they're not real haikus.
Oh, goodness.
But it's
Stick to the
$575.
Yeah, they have that. But poetry in general is the most packed form of literature, and a haiku is the most packed poetry. So I try to make a nugget, a packed nugget. And I write them very quickly. They just kind of,
They come to you.
I just count on my fingers. It's
MintModa is about intuition, and how you distill that down is just amazing. All these nice little, things that are unexpected. A haiku is definitely unexpected in fashion forecasting, and I love that.
Maybe you'll have to write one for our episode and we can put it in our show notes.
I'm happy to.
Oh, that would be lovely.
I'm happy to. It's kind of like doing everything on many different levels. Like a haiku, I'm so glad you like it, but maybe some people are alienated by it. But then on the very same page, we have the totems or the keys. So it's a white shirt, a tailor jacket, and a slouchy trouser, or whatever the look is. We'll work on a lot of different levels, from kind of trippy down to very brass tacks. This is what you need to do. This is the buckle. This is the button. We work on both levels, or I would say more than both, several.
Oh, so many different angles. And that's great because people process information in different ways. And so you're providing all of those different options.
Kind of a left brain, right brain thing.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Sharon. It has been a delight. Best wishes as you continue to predict our future.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and lovely to meet both of you. In person.
I want to add, in the number of years that I've been in the industry, I think that you are doing such a tremendous job at MintModa, and I would urge everyone watching to go to mintmoda.com, explore what the opportunities are there, and see the difference that can be in terms of fashion forecasting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do not forget, subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming episodes of Clothing Culture.